you'd be overpaying in free agency. That's always what happens, particularly along the offensive line. There's never an abundance of these guys that hit the open market. So I don't think I think it's probably the smartest strategy they could have gone with. I think a lot of it has to do with what was out there or what's going to be out there in free agency. And especially with the guard market, you're right. There's not a lot of intriguing options. And it reminds me of what they did a couple years ago. And I know that people are going to cringe when I say Chase Claypool, but remember that receiver class in 2023 in free agency wasn't great. I think Juju Smith-Schuster was the the top free agent on the market. So they traded for Claypool. They traded for DJ Moore, or within the picks, trade for the number 1 overall pick. That was their strategy of how they were going to upgrade that position. And that's kind of a philosophy that they used here to upgrade, flip 2/3 of the interior of the offensive line. And, a 2026 fourth-round pick for Joe Thuney, a two-time first-team All-Pro guy. He's been a 4-time All-Pro, including the second-team nods. And then the 2025 six that you're giving up for Jonah Jackson, I think it's good value. I know some people are going to look at the salaries that they're incurring, taken on this year by having these guys come via trade, but it's, you'd be overpaying in free agency. That's always what happens, particularly along the offensive line. There's never an abundance of these guys that hit the open market. So I don't think I think it's probably the smartest strategy they could have gone with if they clearly looked at the market and said, well, none of these other guys are worth overpaying for at the guard position.
Do they want to keep Joe Thuney on a new deal?
Well, I mean, he makes 16 this year, and he's got some time left. He's 32. So, I mean, I think he's still got a lot of good football left to be played, and we know that he's versatile. Like this year, he gets the MVP of the Kansas City Chiefs because of, moving to left tackle after playing left guard for so long to replace Wanya Morris there. And it was, to protect Patrick Mahomes and his blind side during the playoffs, during the Super Bowl, after not really playing that position pretty much ever as an NFL player. That's pretty remarkable to show that even at 32, he's still got a lot of upside. He's a Pro Bowl caliber player for the next couple of years. So I think that the Bears will have to factor that in before they get into any sort of contract talks or maybe even talks of an extension down the line. But I think it's good value for a player who clearly, coming off back-to-back All-Pro seasons is at, the top of his game right now.
Does it take them out of Drew Dahlman or maybe even make them more of a player for that one last piece on their O-line that they want to go get next week?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, Carm. I think that you look at Drew Dahlman knowing that he's the best center available in free agency right now, and this is their one that they can go bid on. They don't have to get in a bidding war on multiple offensive line positions in free agency when this is the one. Would be the last piece to flip the entire interior, and it's effectively the Carolina Panthers model that they used last year. It's the one that Ben Johnson, when I asked him, can you realistically do this in one off season, and he pointed directly to what the Panthers did to help Bryce Young take down that sack number to 29 last year.
Right.
It's impressive. It was impressive, to see once that unit started clicking, and I know they were a 5-win football team too. But you could tell that the offense just functioned better from the inside out with the adjustments that they made, and it was a smart strategy for them to deploy, and one that the Bears are clearly trying to do themselves.
Is Dennis Allen's quiet voice as the defensive coordinator not being heard for the pass rusher opposite side of Montez Sweat?
I think he'll be all right. I think he's going to end up getting what he wants at some point because everybody's acknowledged how important in a pass rusher opposite Montez Sweat is. And I know that we've talked about the buzz around Khalil Mack actually be coming back to Chicago and the notable ties that Dennis Allen was the head coach that drafted him with the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't know if we're going down that path right now, but the thing is, since they went about the offensive line and flipping two important positions in the trade market instead of using those free agency resources with their near $79 million in cap space to do that, I think it actually opens up some good opportunity for them to address that position next week if they want to go after a pass rusher.
What's more likely, going off the Dennis Allen? I'm glad you brought that up. Going off the the Dennis Allen, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like his tree of guys that he's been with, I guess. His ties, yeah. Players. What's more likely, Mac or Chase Young?
The reason I have a hard time with the Khalil Mack thing is not only Ryan, like that was the guy that sparked the entire rebuild. Yes. When Poles traded him in 2022, that was the day that was the start of the teardown. It had to. He's an incredible player still at 34 years old. And if there's this idea out there that, maybe he just wants to be a situational pass rusher. Well, you're not paying a situational pass rusher upwards of, $20 million, $22 million to not be playing full time. Yeah, so what is his appetite for what role? And what is the Bears' appetite for bringing somebody like that back? Do we know? Is there any bad blood? There really wasn't any sort of crossover when he was traded because it happened right at the start of Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus's tenure. So I would think the Chase Young one, granted it was more recent when they traded for him. What was it, a year ago now, from Washington. Mm-hmm. I think it's, he's a younger player too. That's, something that you'd be factoring in, but God, you can't deny the production with Khalil Mack and the, career high in sacks that he had 2 years ago with the Chargers. I'm not completely convinced the Chargers want to let him go and not try to re-sign him in free agency.
Okay. Courtney Cronin's our guest for a couple more minutes. It's Carmen and Jurko on ESPN 1000. So 2 guards in the trade market, maybe Dahlman next week. Is this lining up for them to take a running back at 10?
That's the one that I think a lot of Bears fans want to believe. And,
not us.
I'm not in the camp on Ashton Jeanty. I think that this is a deep running back group in the draft that you could end up getting that position later on and be, plenty happy with it. Not something that you'd have to do right away. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not of that school of thought. I'm sure that Ashton Jeanty is going to make a lot of teams happy. We heard, at the draft that at the combine that he's going to end up taking a visit up to Chicago potentially at some point. Obviously, he's going to visit Dallas. It doesn't count against their top 30 allotment because he's from the area, so he's one of the local guys. But I think that there are other running backs, whether it's, you can even look at some of the higher end ones like, Marion Hampton, Quinshon Judkins, some of the day 2 picks that have been talked about. And I think that would even be better than using your first round pick on a running back.
We are in agreement all the way around. All right, so splash next week. Dahlman sounds like it's going to be a real thing, and they're going to be in on it. I like the way you summed that up. They can go out there and just, here it is. Come play with us. Yeah. And I get it. A lot of teams are flush with cap space. That's what's going to make, I think, next week interesting. But do we expect them to kind of hit the ground running, and that's where they're going to start?
Yeah, I feel since they already have it. It's like what Ryan Poles said last week when asked about, will you be aggressive in free agency? And he made the comment about how when the priorities are aligned, when your priorities are clear cut, when you know exactly what they are. And that means you're a team that's not got a million spots to fill because you're going through a rebuild and you're trying to just piece things together. You can allocate, if you have less things to attack in free agency, then you can allocate more dollars towards going after the bigger fish. And if that ends up being Drew Dahlman, which I know is not the sexiest thing in the world. He's a center who was limited to 9 games last year because he had an ankle injury, but he is the best center available on the free agent market. He's a good fit for a zone running scheme. I think that it would be wise for them to make sure that they're at the top of the market. And the GM said as much as far as being an active participant in free agency and going after what you want.
All right, Courtney, anything else we should know?
I think this is not necessarily for next week, but one takeaway I had from the combine in talking with scouts there and just in kind of getting a feel, what is the strength of this draft class? The defensive tackle group, guys, is one of the deepest that I can remember in recent history. I know Matt Miller, one of our ESPN draft analysts, has 30 defensive tackles with draftable grades. Wow. The shift has been, it's not only been signaled, it's currently in active full force to where, teams need that disruptive 3 technique as much as they need an edge rusher. And that's a position that the Bears absolutely need to consider here, just given how much, the injury to Andrew Billings was a big one. It affected everybody, but maybe the growth of Jervon Dexter not coming along as soon as most people would have hoped. I still think you need depth at that position. Zach Pickens hasn't worked out there. I don't think it's a free agency priority per se, but it's one as we start to figure out what they do next week and then what the holes are remaining after that. That's one where I think the attention turns.
We were hoping Mason Graham falls down the draft board a little bit. Maybe the Bears have the ability to draft him at 10.